In this video, we're going to be exploring pipelines, proxy sets, and data in BFFless. These tools are used when we need to do something server-side, beyond just what a static website would need to do. Something such as sending an email, adding a record to a database, or hitting another API. We need the ability to run cloud functions in a way, or server-side actions triggered from our front end via post or GET request. So currently we're on the j5s.dev website, which is hosted on BFFless, and the admin is admin.j5s.dev. If we click through to our project, we can see proxy rules and data. Let's go ahead and create a proxy rule in a database for email contact forms. So I'm going to go and create schema and say, call it contacts. And we'll just say name is required, email is required, then we'll say comment. It's also required. All three are strings, no default values. Create the schema. Great. Now, proxy rules are ways, if you think about Next.js and you have your response handlers, a proxy rule is really just a dynamic response handler. Now let's go over to proxy rules and proxy sets and look at creating dynamic response handlers so that we can connect to the data and set and read from the data if we want, but mostly just populate the database. First thing we're going to do is create a rule set and call it API backend. And this is production. Now, a proxy rule set has many proxy rules. You can also, and then you also can attach your proxy rule set to your aliases. So here I've attached the proxy rule set I just created to each of my current aliases. So now I have a proxy rules attached to my aliases, but I don't have any proxy rules yet. So now we're going to go ahead and create a new rule. Here I define the path that I want to trigger the rule. And we're just going to say contact. And your options for proxy type are external proxy, internal rewrite, internal form handler, and pipeline. We'll get into these others in another video, but for right now, we're just going to go over pipeline. Contact form handler. And now we have an option if we want to add validators, such as authentication required or rate limit. Maybe some additional validators are coming soon. But for right now, those are the two options for form validation at like a validation level. There's some additional validation we can do inside of the input handler. We can actually come in and we can make sure certain fields are present, such as name is required. And we can say email is required. And so now we're actually telling the post request to change this to a post request that if these two fields are not in the body of the post request, that it will throw an error. Next, we come in and we can create a record from our pipelines. There's other things we can do. Won't get into all these details now, but you can create a database record. If we wanted to conditionally run this step, we could do so here as well. But we're going to always run it at this point. Now, if we check out our target schema that's available, we have our contacts, and then we can map our fields. So we have our database field name, and we have our inputs now. Now, we can know what's available as an input, what variables are there from this dropdown. We can see request body, user ID if they're logged in, some additional platform information, and then also information from previous steps. I can grab step form validation dot name and step form validation dot email. Let's go ahead and add comment is required. So these three are required, and that way when we come down here, we'll have all these values available to use. Then we'll want to either let it have a default response or return our own. We'll keep a default response for right now. Let's create the rule. And before we just ship it to production, we can test it. So what we'll do is we're going to test our pipeline. We already have the default name and email. If we do this now, it should return an error because we don't have our comment. Let's see what happens. We're not going to simulate an authenticated user. Form validation failed. So comment is required. This is the response the front-end UI would have gotten back. So now I run it, and it successfully worked. This is the response coming back from the backend. It gives us all the information from the database. And it actually ran it as well. So if we go jump on over to our form fields, we'll see the value was input. The record was created. So we've actually already deployed this and it's live. If we make a post request to our API, following the path that we specified, it will create the record. Let's give that a shot with Postman. So if we go to Postman, we make a call to our URL. Post request, body, name, email. Hello from Postman. Should be working live. Let's see what happens. This is user error on my end. We said API comment. The form, the endpoint that I created, was API contact. So we're binding to this path, not the one I tried. And it tells you exactly that. 404 could not find subdomain alias www, which was what our request was to. www/API comment is the full path. So if we come back to change this to contact, it should work. And there it is. We made the request. The form handler caught it, and added the record to the database and gave us a response. One great tool to use when trying to understand what's happening on your backend that will give you some insight is this debugging. If I go ahead and I've enabled the debugging, and I make the request again, you can see it says one run. I've got a full log of everything that it did, and I can inspect the form validation, what the input was and what the output was, and the input and the output of each step. Here's create record. This can be very helpful if your backend pipelines get very complex and you need to know what's going on. We can now go and look at our data one final time and see that there are 3 records that were created from our tests. Our initial one from debugging, one from our first one from Postman, then our second one from debugging Postman using the debugging tool. This completes our initial video for pipelines and proxy rule sets. The next video, we'll do some more advanced deep dive of proxy rule sets and explore other rules that we can create, such as creating chat agents, connecting to replicate, handling file uploads, signing URLs, and we have vector search, store embeddings, connecting to Stripe, GitHub APIs, Google Calendar, and more. Thank you for watching. Please leave your feedback in the comments. I'd love to hear what you guys think. If you have any feature requests, do that as well.